And welcome back, everybody. It is my distinct pleasure to bring in this week's guest. Before joining us here at Ruckus, he had worked in the operations center on one of the largest U.S. carriers. I first started interacting with him, I would say about 7 or 8 years ago, when he was managing several of the lab teams, including our education labs. We were lucky enough to bring him formally into education just about 5 years ago. He works as our primary conduit between the education team and the tax organization here in Ruckus. It is my pleasure to introduce Matt Clouda. Welcome, Matt.
Hey, Brian. Thanks. The movie Talladega Nights, when he's sitting there and he's at the press conference and he says, "I don't know what to do with my hands." That is literally what just happened to me.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
You know what? It's funny. You mentioned that large carrier network. My buddy who still works there, he sent me a message yesterday. They have, I think it was over 20,000 devices on that network that are not supported.
Oh, lovely. Nice.
Yeah, and that number might be low. It might be higher than that, but yeah, it was insane.
Yeah, that's the ones they're aware of that are on there that are not supported. So, yep.
A little scary.
Yeah.
So, how's it going? It's good to see you. You've had a whole week where you haven't been on podium.
Good. Yeah. I've not actually taught this week. That's a rarity in my schedule this year thus far. So, yeah.
Yeah, you've been humping it pretty good. So, thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah, no doubt. It's been a while since we've been on a session together, so thought that'd be a good way to go about things. So, and talking about like unsupported devices on that network does kind of lead us somewhat into the area of conversation for today, which is home networking. So, there, of course, that carrier does handle, people's homes. That's one of their major things that they do. And so you've got all kinds of things being used to hook up into those carrier networks. And so that's kind of our topic here for this session, is to talk about, home networking just in general from a Ruckus perspective or from a overall CommScope perspective, whether you're working off of devices like ICXs and APs from Ruckus, or whether you're working off of things like surfboards. So I will hand some over to you on that. So
yeah, it's really interesting because, I've been really fortunate. I've been able to sit down and talk to Evan Grote a lot, and he handles the consumer side. And when I started to initially see commercials for, here we have Xfinity. So there was a lot of, the meshed home Wi-Fi stuff. And we do something extremely similar on the Ruckus side, just a little bit different, right? It was really interesting to see how, take COVID out of the picture, right? The type of connectivity you have in your house now. And you mentioned I come from an operations background. I come from a 5 nines background. So our goal was to have 99.999% uptime. So when you look at what home users are doing, right? A great example is last night, my son's upstairs. He's playing Fortnite with his friends and created his clan and has everything going. Well, I have Ruckus hardware in our house. Not a blip, not a problem, not like they don't come downstairs and say the Wi-Fi is not working, or, oh, the internet's slow, or, oh, this or that. Like, we've structured it really well to where it just works. And on the consumer side, they're doing a lot of the same things. And it was really interesting because they use wireless meshing when they do that, because it's a little device that you plug into the outlet. Well, it creates a dedicated channel back. So they have an individual highway, like Evan was explaining, that goes back to the main access point that doesn't overlap with the existing Wi-Fi channels that are out there. So it's a really cool thing that they've done that's completely seamless to the consumer that doesn't know it. They just know they have Wi-Fi coverage everywhere they need it. And I thought that was really interesting. And then I talked to people like Jim Palmer, who says, there's no need to ever have a wire plugged into your laptop. Yeah, maybe, but I like it because that's my world. That's where I come from,
Yeah.
And he's right to a point. There's so much advancement in the wireless technology today that whether you're in the office, whether you're at a hotspot, whether you're at home, you have really, really good coverage. And we have all the products that do that. So depending on your level of technical aptitude, you can kind of do whatever you want with that. For example, I have a rack in my house, and I took a picture of it and sent it to my sister, and she was like, "You are not normal." And she's right. Most people don't have environments like that, but I do some different kind of nerdy stuff. So it's really cool just how you can do that, and the level of complexity is really open to what you want to do with it. But it also poses other challenges too, right? You do something and then all of a sudden somebody comes downstairs and says, hey, this isn't working. You're like, oh man, now I have to troubleshoot my home network too. So you have to balance it a little bit and not overcomplicate it.
Yep. Well, and with the advent of things like meshing and things like that, not only are you getting greater overall coverage within the home environment, but you're also adding redundancy to that. So going back to what you're saying about the 5 nines uptime and kind of the world you came out of, that is becoming more applicable to the home user because many of them are working from home. Many of them are, many of them now make their living streaming on YouTube or on Twitch or on other platforms. There are so many things that need that level of redundancy for that connectivity without doing a full rack of equipment, without kind of having that that expertise or knowledge.
Yeah. One thing I'd like to do, I'd love to be a fly on the wall for a conversation in like a boardroom or whatever, where people are talking about, we've sent all of our employees home. They work from home now. If one of our employees' internet dies, what does that comparison look like versus if you have an entire floor in an office, a switch dies, right? So you take out the productivity of an entire floor versus, well, we just lost the productivity of one person for a day. How that comparison is done and what the approach is to that. That is scary because when you think about it, you don't crater an entire team at that point. You just kind of chop a leg off and then you still kind of limp along when you do it. So it's really interesting,
Yep. And there are certainly, when it comes to like work from home, for example, one of the things that I know we've talked about having on these sessions, but I don't know if it like made it to like a full episode would fit or not, is the ability when you like using a RUCKUS AP, if you've already got Smart Zone deployed within your environment, you can have a hole poked in that firewall, or if it's externally facing, either way, you can use the data plane coming back into the environment. So that way, when a user's at home and they're connecting in from their AP at their house, it's actually still part of that Smart Zone environment. And so the user's not connecting to a VPN. They're not doing anything else on their laptop other than just connecting to the exact same Wi-Fi network they have at work. If you're using CloudPath for onboarding or anything else, that is still used the same way. All your DNS requests, everything goes through that tunnel. It's automatically encrypted for you as part of that process, and it makes it very transparent when you've got a remote workforce that they work the exact same way they would in the office.
I would have loved to have seen when there were pallets of webcams sitting in offices and as people left to grab a webcam, if right next to it was a RUCKUS AP that they snagged, went home. And you're right, because you take out, and this is something that I don't know. Look, you get an InfoSec guy on here and he's probably going to tell you the 18,000 ways where that environment makes him extremely uncomfortable. And I understand that. I mean, I get it. But when you look at the simplicity, it saves you money on hardware in the long run. It saves you money on licensing costs. It saves you money across the board. Now you got an employee plugs their access point in, attaches to that Wi-Fi network. It's SSH tunnel back into the controller, like you're saying, you're done. They are up and working and everything's fine right there. And I would love to see environments like that. I think the only reason there's a gap there is because of the information security aspect of it, where they've said we need to harden this more and ensure that, you have to have a pretty rock solid Smart Zone deployment out there to where it's fully DPSK'd, right? You know that the person that's attaching to it is an employee. Everything's set and structured, and it's authenticating off of the right pieces right off the AD domain or whatever they're doing or onboarding it. But that's such an amazing solution that I don't know if it's out there. I mean, I haven't spoken.
Well, and you can do it DPSK'd, or like we talked about earlier, if you are engaging CloudPath in your environment, that can leverage the exact same, enterprise level with the certificates on those devices as well. So you can have it full certificate-based deployment where if it's not that user's device with that user logged in with that certificate, it doesn't onboard to the network. So, I mean, you can make it be the exact same as it is in the office from a security perspective, which is a really cool thing. So,
yeah, it kind of terrifies me a little bit when I look at what I always say. This is a hill I'll stand on forever. But you build a product and you build a software technology behind it, and it has an intended purpose, right? And then you bring the human element into it, and guess what? It just exponentially grows because we find new, cool, different things to do with it to make it work for our environment or what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And I think with the product suite that we have, talking about things like this, all of this stuff is possible. It just has to be done. And that to me is the ideal situation. Like I said, every single employee here should have an access point sent to their house. Here it is. And even with the environment I have, I could do the same thing, right? Just spin up an additional WLAN that is SSH tunnel in, and guess what? When I attach to that one, I'm working. When I detach from that one, I'm home labbing or doing whatever.
Yep.
That's absolutely perfect. And there's a separation in traffic there too.
Yeah. Yeah. And it could be at the choice of the employer, basically, whether within those zones that they happen to use for remote employees, if they go in and put in like a guest or personal home Wi-Fi into that, then that way you're not having as much likelihood of a person trying to route around it and, piggyback onto that corporate Wi-Fi. If you are giving them like, okay, here's your home Wi-Fi that's presented as soon as you're in this zone and part of this, and that all splits out locally. So that doesn't tunnel back into that network environment. So there's a lot of flexibility and options that exist in that. And I mean, yeah, like you say, so much of the innovation in our industry overall comes out of customers doing very unique things with devices that were not necessarily intended. If you look at like vMotion, teleportation, live migration for virtual machines, that was originally an idea of something to do during a fixed maintenance window, so I could move a VM from one server to another and then do hardware maintenance on a device. It was customers that actually were like, wait, I could make scripts to do this dynamically, so if one of my servers is getting overwhelmed, I will just move a VM over somewhere else where the processor's sitting twiddling its thumbs, So much of the innovation in the industry comes with just customers, whether that's consumers or whether that's enterprise, using technology in creative ways. So,
yeah. And one thing too, this is the thing I really think about when I do this, because we work in education and our entire goal is to educate people on the products and the technologies. And you and I have both seen people that we've had come into classes and watch them grow and just watch their skill set and their knowledge grow. And it's such a cool thing to see. And that's not a direct result of you and I running a class with them. That's a direct result of they get bits of information from that class and then they apply it to their everyday life and they grow. And that's all I really want, right? But then I look at environments like I have at home or my friends have at home where you buy an Intel NUC and you put it together. It's a tiny little box. They're cheap. They're easy to do. You can get ESXi 6.5 licenses. I think you can get one for free. You can build all of this stuff and start to build. If you're into this and this is something that you want to get into and you have a 7150 at home and an access point or 2 or 3, you can start to create things that look like a production network to where you can really tune and refine those skills. And you don't nuke an office when you do it. Yep. So if you don't have access to lab hardware and you don't have access to all these things, you really have the ability to kind of get a good foundation under your feet, a good comfort, know what's going to break it, know what's not. I mean, you can do all of it. It's such a great opportunity. It really is. So hopefully we see more and more of that, because this is, in my opinion, probably the most fun industry you can work in, especially on the networking side.
Yeah. And not only that, but just, I mean, the fact that, I've had R600s running here in my house for 4 to 5 years, I would say overall. And they're just so dang rock solid. I mean, they're just, I would say I reboot one of them maybe once every 5-6 months or something, if that, and that's usually not that usually turns out not to be the problem anyway. But, comparing that to more consumer grade hardware, what you would be usually maybe renting from your carrier or something like that, it's a different world, and that's both with running, and I swap them back and forth between running cloud and running unleashed and working in several different ways so that I can play with that in different ways. But if it was just me using it just for kind of the regular home Wi-Fi, just leave that on one, whether it's unleashed or cloud, and just let that do its thing, so.
Yeah. And it's professionally advantageous to do that, because we talked about the Intel NUCs and everybody on our team knows about them. And most of, I think, if not all of our developers have them. So most everybody's running an instance of Smart Zone at home. And if you want to be able to sit down and effectively build training towards it, then you have to work in it all the time. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we could run into is you and I aren't in the same piece of hardware day in and day out managing it, right? So we have to find a way to sit down and make sure that we have enough exposure, I guess is the right word, to that product to where when you do walk into a classroom, you can relate to the guy or the gal that's sitting there saying, hey, I've got this problem. You're like, oh, I get it. You know what I mean? Versus, well, I know the training material really well, but I've never actually touched the product. That's not how we roll. So, you know, and that's what makes it really interesting. So,
yeah. And I would say there are some factors to consider, you know, like a Ruckus AP at home may not be for everybody, you know, and it's, you know, in ways it's kind of funny because I think it sits on both sides of the stack and it fits really well. So like for the person that really does not want to get really heavily involved in technology, Unleashed is really simple to utilize, very simple to do your basic setup in there. And once that's run, you leave it alone. You don't touch it. You're done. Yep. You know, for the very advanced person, or maybe I should say insane person that has a full rack at home, no name being specified here. But for them, you know, they can go in and play like all to that level, and they have that rack that's in there with their own firewalls and everything else to be able to do things like opening up a hole in there if they want to run a gaming server that's always going to redirect across to a particular device in their home network or something like that. It's kind of the area in between that I think is still kind of a sweet spot for things like, you know, for something like a surfboard, things like that, because it is an all-in-one, and it has, you know, like, okay, you can go in and open up your firewall ports, do things like that you wouldn't have that directly on a Ruckus AP because they're more geared towards an enterprise that's going to use a different device for that function. So like, yeah, if you've got the whole rack and you need to do those things, you can do those things. If you don't need to do those things at all, which, you know, describes most home users, most people don't go in and do that. Then kind of at either side of that major spectrum, I think having those Ruckus APs at home makes a lot of sense. Kind of those people in the middle, I would kind of still gear those more towards like a surfboard type solution, things like that. So, yeah.
So here's a great example. You just spawned this thought. So Joe Obby, everybody loves Joe. He's one of our developers, and they develop tools for support and things like that. He has an issue now to where everybody's working from home. He's got 2 access points sitting on his desk right now that were shipped to him because they have to develop tools for what some of the TAC tools are that are there. And he needs something to be able to connect back into his network. Well, he's sitting behind a surfboard that it's not running in bridge mode, so it does not have a public IP address from his provider, and he's trying to figure out how to get traffic into it. So we sat there and dinked around with it, and finally it's like, dude, you need to go get a firewall, and you need to have your provider put your modem in bridge mode because your use case is not normal. Yours is not what you were just talking about. Typical average consumer, you know, you might do some gaming at night, streaming Netflix, whatever. You need this to function like you can get traffic to and from this network. And so that's where he's like, oh, man. So he's trying to find hardware for it and everything else. And, of course, Tom and I are sending him all kinds of hardware to look at. But, yeah, it's crazy. I mean, there's so many different use cases. And now we look at where we're at today. The thing that terrifies me is there's a lot of people out there that need an environment like that don't have the technical aptitude in terms of networking and firewalls and everything else to be able to build it. Yeah. You know, that's what scares me. And that's where you talking about having an AP that is tunneled back in. You know, if you can segment that network back off of where you're at, and then you're just an extension off of your corporate office, then that solves so many problems. But
it does.
You know, I'm surprised it hasn't been a bigger issue and concern for the past year than what I think it probably should have been, but that's just me.
Yeah. Yep.
So, but I mean, it's like you said, I mean, the nutty people that have racks in their house and do all these different things. I mean, that to me, if I was in his situation, it'd be easy. I'd just spin it right up and be done with it. But he's got to now sit down and look at, well, what hardware do I need and what can I put in and what will my provider support? And it becomes very, very headache driven. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep.
So, but hey, it's fun at the end of it.
Yeah.
Another problem to troubleshoot.
Yeah, you get it all working. You have that sense of accomplishment there, and you know you can deal with that if that happens to prop up in an enterprise or other environment at that stage. So yeah, yep.
Yeah, and there's consumer products out there that'll do it, but I don't know. I just don't know enough about them. I guess I'm getting long enough in the tooth to where I don't necessarily want to get ripped completely out of my comfort zone and go pull a consumer grade product off a shelf and say, "Oh, this is going to be my firewall and my router and everything else." I don't know what my comfort level is with that yet. So
yeah.
So here's a question. You've been on podium a lot. You've been teaching a lot. And I'm surprised your voice works to this day because you have to utilize it so much. It's like the guy's hammer that he uses for his entire life. That thing's got to be beat to death. But
yeah.
And kind of sitting there talking to, students and classes, have you seen a shift in how they're approaching their overall day-to-day network admin, network engineering roles? I mean, are they looking at things differently? Are they trying to bring in new solutions? Or is it just kind of status quo? Hey, let's go. Let's get this thing done and keep going. Are you seeing any shift there?
Most of it's been status quo, in all honesty. So I do see some where they are dealing more with a, much larger work from home type of audience, and they are kind of seeing like, okay, what does that mean for us as far as the corporate network and assets and things of that nature? In all honesty, I would say it hasn't been as much due to the pandemic that's raging, but the shift I've been seeing has been more in relation to some of the vulnerabilities that happened to specific companies in our industry recently that are involved in monitoring networks and things like that. I won't, put out names since they're not a direct competitor, but they are someone who you probably know if you've been kind of following news and stuff like that. That there were some pretty major vulnerabilities found there, and some pretty major vulnerabilities in let's say a large global email provider, or application. So I think that has been generating a bit more awareness. There's been more security concern and more kind of like, okay, what do we really do now to vet? What additional steps do we need to take from an intrusion detection and prevention type of scenario? That I think that has been more top of mind recently than any other kind of pandemic related changes. So
yeah, that's the fun part, right? That's never going away because And I'd steal the term from you because you're the first person I ever heard use it, but there are bad actors out there, and they just want to do. It's almost like they're adolescent teenagers. Like, I want to see what I can get away with here. What is this going to work? Can I do this?
Yeah.
And I just don't. I don't have that in me, but.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of those things are state-driven bad actors. So that's a whole different ball game when it comes to that. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's terrifying because I have. So here's another example. It's kind of funny. This rack that I have in my house, it's probably more well monitored than most enterprise networks. I mean, I know what's going on with that thing. If something fails, I know. So, but I also have something to where it shows me what ports people are trying to hit and what region they're coming from. So I can see on my firewall who's trying to just port scan it and see what's going on. And it is amazing how much traffic hits that thing where it's just, and I know it's just flat out port scanning. They're just looking for holes to get in. It is unreal to me how much of that traffic is out there. I'm like, well, I don't have anything. I mean, if you want a gaming server, have it. That's all you're going to get. I mean, there's nothing in there. It's crazy. Like, my music is on my phone. I don't have a massive library of movies or anything like that. It's just here. Okay, have the gaming server. It's backed up. So I'll just rebuild it and you're on your own.
And you shipped it over to Discord, so there's not even a TeamSpeak server there anymore. So yeah,
exactly. A Discord, man, that thing, whoever thought that thing up was a genius, because I don't know how many different Discord channels are out there now, but there's a lot. And it is so convenient because you just get information out to your little group. Everybody has it. Then you have voice channels and everything. It's so slick. I mean, even my son even uses it. I was like, how do you know about Discord? Like, oh yeah, you play Fortnite all the time. That's why.
Well, and the potential acquisition of that may see that folding into more enterprise-like applications, say, so I think that'll become kind of a, not just collaborative for, gamers and online communities that are, communities that just happen to have similar interests, but also used in the enterprise as well. So, yep, it's super funny because we're talking about taking enterprise, hardware and shifting that into a consumer, but there's also a lot of, consumer things like Discord that are, making shifts into the enterprise at the same time. So
there's a potential acquisition of Discord. Wait, what? I don't know about this.
Oh yeah. I won't name names, but yeah, it's been in the news this week. So I know you've been busy this week. So yeah.
Man, maybe I should pull the news up. I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah. And it's either going public or potential acquisition. But yeah, it looks pretty imminent. So yep.
Well, I know my first Google is going to be that when we hang up because I'm curious about that. It just terrifies me that the only thing that I worry about with things like that is you have a product like that works so well. Please don't mess it up.
Yeah.
Don't stick your grubby fingers in there and start trying to change everything and put a different shell on it and make it fancy. Just leave it alone. It's fine. Like, buy it all you want. You already have the user base. People are using it.
Yep.
So
yeah, leverage it into other areas, which hopefully is what the goal is. So yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And now, I mean, that's crazy too, because now when you look at all these things to where if there's an application you can download on your laptop, there's almost a 99% chance that you can download that same application on your phone that will do the same thing. So, I mean, you want to talk about an electronic leash, you have one for everything. I mean, you want your email, you've got it. You want Discord, you've got it. Everything. Yep. It's all out there. It's crazy. And then there's some where I'm like, there needs to be an app for this. I'm like, no, there doesn't. Just get your laptop out. Oh, it's so funny. So what's new with you? What's been happening?
Oh, so same stuff. Just very busy with deliveries, and it's been going really well. We've got the new, well, it's not as new now, but still the RCNA exam has been out there for a few months. There's been a lot of demand around the ICX offerings. With the RCWA, the wireless exam will be coming here in a few months. And I think you had a discussion with Dave on that a few weeks ago, if I remember correctly.
We did.
That, that'll increase a lot of demand around what the classes that come out to coincide with that as well. So, been really busy first part of the year, and I think it'll be really busy as we continue to move forward. So, yep.
That was looking back at that was a really tough blueprint to put together for the RCWA because you have not only the wireless RF, but you also have the products behind it. So how do you, it was a challenge. So it'll be really interesting to see how that thing comes together, because that one I had to scratch my head over it for a while. I was like, oh man, how are we going to do this?
Yeah.
You know, and I kind of get the impression after talking to the Brian Harkins of the world, and we have so many people that are they just know Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Wi-Fi guys typically understand the RF extremely well.
Oh yes.
Then it just turns into a product problem, right? So how do you solve for training people and ensuring that they're very well versed in these products that, basically manage and support these technologies? That's kind of the gist I've gotten from it. Whereas you look at
you understand all the underlying theories and everything. Now you need to know where the button is. So
Yep. And that was a big challenge. But then you look at the wired side, right, which you and I have dealt with forever, and ICX is we don't necessarily have that problem. I mean, you can see the physical wire that plugs into it. You know what's happening across that wire. Now you have to start getting all the building blocks on top of it so people understand those pieces. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Such a difference. But yeah, that was a bit of we had some growing pains with that internally. Like, holy crap, what are we going to do here?
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I guess is good. It shows you, here's where I'll give, especially our developers, a plug. I don't know if it's stubbornness. I don't know if it's brilliance. I don't really know what it is, but they didn't even flinch. They grabbed all of these products and dug into them and got to a point to where, I mean, I was on the phone with, Richter a couple of weeks ago, and he was poking through SmartZone. I was like, oh my goodness, he's like expert level, going through everything, knew where everything was, knew exactly what did what. And he comes, I mean, he was writing BGP and MPLS classes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then he jumps into that, and it's just seamless. He just went right into it. So it's really impressive to me, at least.
Yeah.
So, all right. So we got to get you a rack in your house. We've got to get you a firewall, ICXs, APs. We'll get point-to-point VPN tunnels built.
Before the last year, I flew around so much, so that's why I have a laptop that has an extra 2 gig NVMe inside it and has 64 gig of RAM. So I can run all my VMs and everything inside my laptop, and that is basically my rack and my nook right there.
Yep. That
whenever I travel anywhere, I fold up my rack and my nook and put them into my laptop bag and bring that onto the plane with me. So yeah. So it's a portable rack, so to say. So yeah.
The one thing that I guess the comfort that I got out of it was the same thing, traveling so much and being on the road. You're on public Wi-Fi all the time. Well, things come up, right? You need to get into your bank account or you need to get into something. I'm not doing that over public Wi-Fi. I've had every single Hilton point I had stolen out of my account. I don't even know how they got it. So I'll VPN to the house if I have to do that. And once that VPN is up, then I can get in and do what I need to do, because my wife's at home dealing with everything. And so if I have to do something at that point, then I feel comfortable doing it. But being on public Wi-Fi, no, absolutely not. I won't do that. So it's like the prince that has the investment. I don't even remember the spam emails that used to go around where it was the Nigerian prince and he had all this money that he was going to give away or whatever it was. I don't even know. Different phishing schemes.
Yeah. Yep. No doubt.
So cool. Brian, this has been a ton of fun as always. Oh,
absolutely. Absolutely. It's been good to have you on. So, I would say let's, as we're kind of closing out, what do you think out of the past year, what do you think is going to be the biggest business impact moving forward as we normalize or after we normalize, I think?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, first and foremost, probably trying to get used to having somebody sit next to you again is going to be a struggle for a lot of people as they come in and sit down. And in terms of the networking impact, I think the only thing that concerns me is technology moves really fast. Mm-hmm. And so you have all of these developments that have happened from a software level over the past year, because those things still continued and hardware development continued as well. But you didn't have as much rack and stack going on. You have all of this missing data from what your environments look like, because you don't have users sitting there on it, utilizing it nonstop. So I think a lot of places are going to run into some bandwidth issues to where they realize they do have to do some rack and stack work. They are going to have to do some forklift upgrades. They are going to have to look at bandwidth as a whole, because as software develops and grows, bandwidth is bandwidth. I mean, software is the thing that starts to chew that up. And when you develop it, it's always going to chew up more and more, no matter how you do it. So I think there's going to be some pretty large gaps in the understanding of what their historical data looks like. And it's going to be basically starting from scratch. So what are we missing? Where do we need to patch these holes? Where do we need to do these upgrades? And, you take the introduction of Wi-Fi 6E and things like that. There's going to be some scrambled panic in some places when people come back in and start to repopulate offices. I think that would be my initial guess. The schools are pretty much, they're getting kids back into school now, so they're starting to see data there. So I think a lot of it is going to fall on the SEs. They're going to have to go out and look at these sites that are starting to repopulate again and get a really good boots on the ground understanding of what they're seeing. Because if you have 3 out of 10 customers that are seeing an issue, that's not an anomaly. That's a trend at that point. So you're going to see that continue. So it's really going to be sticking their finger on the pulse and figuring out what's going on out there to really correct that, or be aware of it and get in front of it.
Yeah. Yep.
There's so many challenges, but I'm going to assume, your base infrastructure, when you look at it, you have, you've got Windows servers running or LDAP servers or all these things. They're still being patched. They're still being worked on because they're still utilized whether you're at home or not.
Yeah.
My camera died at some point. Oh, well. they're still being utilized in everything, and that's fine. But what it really, really comes down to is, can they handle that load? And that's the thing that kind of, I guess, worries me a little bit. Is it going to be able to keep up with it? So I don't know. I guess we'll see. I mean, there's one way to find out, and that's get everybody back and see what happens. So
yeah, yep.
So we'll find out. But that would be my guess. What's yours? What do you think?
And I was kind of thinking like larger as far as just like the world. I think digital credentialing is going to make a big movement forward because of everything. And if you look at how many countries or businesses or things like that are looking at doing like a vaccination passport as an electronic object, and so a farther movement away from paper, physical IDs, physical credit cards. I think you're going to see a lot more digital credentialing that is more widely accepted globally. And I think that's going to be very interesting from a security and privacy concern. And I think it's going to be really fascinating to see what happens around that from an industry perspective over the next kind of several years, as you get players that are going to stand up and fall, based on how well they handle those issues of security and privacy concerns and things like that. I think businesses will have, some people are just dying to get back into an office. They're like, I need to interact. I need to be around my coworkers. There are other people that never would have thought of working remotely prior to this that are like, hey, this works. I like this. I'm more productive. So I think you're going to see, some companies that traditionally did not, really kind of offer that flexibility. I think you're going to see a lot of pressure around that. And I think that's going to virtualize the workforce a lot more, especially when there's realization that, someone working from home can be just as productive, then potentially, you can have that same productivity from other people that aren't in the same city or the same location as where you happen to be headquartered. And I think that will change a lot of industries. Like tech has been, leveraging that a bit more than the overall, just like if you think of business globally for a while. But I think it's opened the eyes of a lot of global business to a lot of possibilities. And I think that's going to end up with more workplace diversity and a lot of potential benefits coming out of it. So, yep.
Excuse me. Yeah, I think you're dead on because, see, I love to ask brilliant people this question. So I talked to Jim Palmer a couple of weeks ago about Mac randomization. And he's jumping,
great episode. Yeah.
And he's jumping up and down screaming, telling people, you need to be aware of this. Like, this is going to cause problems. And the amount of problems it causes, it doesn't affect wireless guys. It doesn't affect the user. It'll affect wired people. It'll affect the infrastructure. Everybody is going to be affected by it. So it is a big deal. So if you're not aware, make yourself aware, because there are other vendors, we'll say, that are not taking a serious approach to it. And we're over here saying, okay, well, we'll just fix it. So when you look at things like that, there are like Apple, right? Their whole push right now is privacy, and I think they're doing things that are trying to give the consumer a sense of that, and I can appreciate that. But when you talk about, digital keying, as we could put it, or digital certs or whatever, digital identity, remember you used to have a key fob from RSA that had numbers that ran on it, that to be able to connect to your VPN, you had to input those numbers. That we're getting there a heck of a lot quicker than I think anybody really expected. And at what point does it become, you sit down at I'm going to show you how old I am, any terminal, right? You grab any laptop, any computer on the planet. You pull up one application, you open it. It's completely virtualized. It's a contained environment that ties you into your work environment, and you're done. Like I think we're so close to that, to where, like you said, remote work no longer becomes an issue because the infrastructure is there. You can be in the middle of the Ukraine tomorrow and pull up a session, and it's your desktop, and you have everything you need, access to all of your resources, regardless of where you are in the world. That is where carrying a laptop around, you don't need, it's great because you have it, but you're getting to a point to where we're going to virtualize that stuff so much and just offload it to where compute's done somewhere else and you're just dealing with it there.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, I see that coming, and it's a really, and I think that I apparently I'm doing a lot of thinking, because I think I just said that another 50 times. We are positioned well enough right now with, be it CloudPath, be it the Smart Zone solution we talked about earlier, these things, to be able to do these things, and no one's the wiser. Like, you just pull it up and it's like magic, right? It just works. But yeah, it'll be really interesting to see that. I mean, we're in the future, man. That's where we're at.
Yep, no doubt.
Yeah, that's
well,
interesting.
And I guess a good final question would be, how does it feel to sit in the other seat for once?
I'm not going to lie. It is very uncomfortable. There was somebody from marketing got a hold of me. So there's one of the writers wanted to come in and do like an interview about the podcast. And she was asking me questions like, oh no, like this is weird. Usually I ask the questions and just, fly out the seat of my butt, but no, it's been great. I think it's a lot of fun. I do appreciate you doing this. I know we were going to try and do this for the 50th, but you were busier than all get out, and we just had things stacked up. So we'll make this 50.1. How about that?
There we go. Onward.
But yeah, it's been absolutely amazing. And Brian, I can't thank you enough for being a part of this and doing this. I mean, it's always such a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah.
So, like I said, that gaming server's working. You're ready to get to it. It's sitting in my house anytime.
Fair enough. I may end up taking you up on that. So nice.
Standing offer. So again, thank you so much. And yeah, this is a ton of fun. So I do appreciate it.
No worries. Have a great day, man.
Yeah, you too. Thanks. See you, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Ruckcast. If you just found us for the first time, be sure to follow or subscribe on your platform of choice so you can be notified of future episodes. If you have ideas for future episodes or can't find Ruckcast on your favorite platform, contact us at ruckcast@comscope.com. And as always, thanks for listening.